Our next session, From Ambition to Action, Achieving Climate Goals with Transparency and Advocacy. Please welcome to the stage CEO and President Ceres, Mindy Luber.
Okay, folks, good morning. I know it's not morning. Many of you have already been here for 2, 3, 4 events. We're all running around the city with 5 places to be at one time. We're trying to figure out how to deal with traffic. But in the end, what is terrific about Climate Week and bringing us together is the goodwill, the energy, the examples of change, and what we can make happen and what we can make happen together. So yes, I am Mindy Luber. I'm the CEO of Ceres, an organization that's worked with many of you over the last 20, 30 years. At Ceres, we have been at this for 35 years, working with investors and companies and policymakers and global partners to mobilize the private sector towards a responsible, sustainable way of doing business and a cleaner, more resilient economy, to prove that profits and the sustainable future of our planet and our people are absolutely things that go hand in hand and that don't conflict with each other. We've made extraordinary progress over the last several decades. Think about this. It was not that long ago, the idea that investors, businesses, and capital market leaders have a business and economic imperative to confront climate change was almost unheard of. When we tried to approach business leaders, financial leaders, talking about climate risk and not climate change, they resisted even the discussion. But think about where we are today, how much we've changed, how extraordinary we've seen change, and the kind of progress. Not enough. Nobody is suggesting we sit on our laurels. Nobody is suggesting we are anywhere near where we need to be. But let's think about today. Climate change, water scarcity, and nature loss are widely understood as financial imperatives that must be dealt with. I know of no company that could deal and run manufacturing facilities without enough water. I know no company that's in fashion or products that doesn't need an environment where they could count on and depend on. I know no company that is not threatened by climate in multiple ways. And they are, and it's clear, and they are acting. Private sector action is evolving beyond setting net zero targets. That was good enough a number of years ago. I'm going to get to 1.5 or 1.7, or I'm going to get somewhere. Goals are good, but they are not good without clear plans to go without them. And now, increasingly, we are working with hundreds of companies and investors to put in place climate action plans, transition plans. If you got goals, show us how you're going to get there. How are you going to meet them? What are the short, medium, and long-term goals? What are you doing to follow up? How are you going to be accountable? And how are you going to show us what you've actually accomplished? It's these kind of clear, specific, boots-on-the-ground plans that we need to see and that we're starting to see. And many of you are leading the way in doing them. And climate action from a financial perspective is now baked into our public policy landscape. We've established new disclosure policies, giving investors long sought-out information about companies' emissions and the financial risks that threaten their investments and their portfolios. And federal investments have only bolstered private sector activity. Think about the Inflation Reduction Act. We all know about it. We talk about it. The biggest, largest climate and clean energy plan in the world has already unleashed billions of dollars in clean energy investments across the country. We are seeing change. We are making a difference. Over the next hour, you'll hear about how businesses are taking advantage of the federal incentives that they were designed to invest in clean energy, and about how states from coast to coast are working to protect the freedom to invest when some say investors and companies ought not to be acting on climate change. And you'll hear about plans for COP29 and how to be part of the most comprehensive call for government action to accelerate the necessary private capital flows to build a prosperous economy. Now, with all of these changes and good news that you will hear, and I am marveling at the stories I'm hearing across the city this week and in every day of my life, we have now seen, we have all seen, we have collectively seen some pushback about why companies and investors ought not to be acting on climate or on DEI, on other values, which frankly enhance capital rather than deplete capital. And it's a call we never could have imagined, companies being attacked because they are considering climate change or water shortage, or investors being told that, in fact, they're in breach of their duty by considering climate or diversity. All I could say on that is, keep doing what you're doing. Nothing could be further from the truth. Consumers, employees, shareholders, they know, and they are telling the companies and investors they work with, that acting on climate is not only good for the economy, it is about building a future. And frankly, folks, it really is the moment in history. We are on the right side of history. And $1 billion telling us that we're not is not going to change the science, the economics, the facts of what we're trying to do. So we're going to keep going. And for all of you who are doing it, thank you. The private sector has a clear role to play, is playing, is coming up with technology and transitions. We need to keep pushing each other, but getting there. And now, to have a conversation about getting there, I'm delighted to be able to invite a friend, a leader, really one of the sage, wise people on these issues, former White House National Climate Advisor, former EPA administrator, and currently the managing co-chair of the powerful coalition, America is All In. I know you all know that Gina is one of the most influential climate leaders in the country and in the world. I'm delighted to call her a friend and invite her up here to join me. Thanks very much. Well, let's give Gina an extra hand for all that she has done to help us.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you, Gina. I suspect that there is no room that you've all been in over the last 2.5 days, or you will be in for the next couple of days, where we didn't talk about the IRA. And frankly, that's not where we're diving in now. But Gina was instrumental, crucial in helping think it through, what's important to the public sector and frankly to the private sector. So we couldn't be more grateful. It's making a difference. Billions of dollars getting into the hands of the private sector is quite amazing.
Mindy, I really have to say, if you want to talk about who's a climate hero and who's making a difference, look in the mirror, honey. Look in the mirror.
How nice. The people in this room, private sector leaders who are making a difference, so thank you. So Gina, we've got an election coming up, and no, we're not going to have a partisan discussion. Ceres is a C3, nonpartisan, but we know that the world will change in the next 6 weeks or so, both at the federal level, Congress, Senate, state houses, local county governments. How do we think about, regardless of the outcome of what happens in Nebraska and, of course, what happens at the White House, what does durable climate action look like? Put another way, what gives you hope that, regardless of the world out there, we will continue to advance our Paris Agreement goals?
Well, Mindy, I don't have any doubt that we'll continue to move forward, none whatsoever. And I think it's because a couple of things. One is that no one can now ignore the challenge of climate change. And certainly one of the brilliances of starting Ceres was knowing that the corporate community, our business community, understands that we are facing a significant challenge. And it's not just here in the US, obviously, but it's a worldwide and global challenge. And we have to turn that challenge into an opportunity. Look, everybody is being impacted by climate change. And the reason why I'm very confident that we'll keep moving forward is that if you look at the past couple of years, the kind of technologies and innovation that is spurring in markets everywhere is just remarkable. We just have to grab the damn things and run with them, right? We have to invest in them, and companies are ready to do that. So, and honestly, Mindy, I don't want to, appear too excited about it, but really, Ceres has awakened the corporate community. They have found a platform to have them safely talk about these issues, even in a difficult political arena. And this is what's going to make a big difference, because the business community is ready for it. We have the technologies we need. What we really need to do is just have the courage to continue to run for it. So I'm not a naysayer. I'm really excited about it. And no matter what happens in the election, we're going to run like hell. That's it.
Nothing like positive news. So following that and digging a little bit, the Inflation Reduction Act, and like it or not, $370 billion is a good thing to have in the economy for building where we need to go. How do we really capitalize on it? I know billions of dollars are already moving out, but how do we envision the role of these non-federal actors evolving as the law takes hold? What should we anticipate seeing?
Well, I think one of the best things about the Inflation Reduction Act is probably that it got done.
No question.
That was not a given, and so it was exciting to see it. But what we're seeing over the course of just 2.5 years is really quite astounding. Between the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and CHIPS and Science Act, we're talking about $910 billion of private sector investment. Private sector investment. So when people say, why'd you spend all this money? We didn't spend money, we enticed private sector money. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act did. And so we're talking about huge opportunities already. And one of the exciting things in the Inflation Reduction Act is not just that it's attracted, almost $400 billion in investments, but it has provided an opportunity for more resources to be devoted in Republican districts because they're communities that have been left behind. And that money is already spurring 600 and some odd projects, large on-the-ground projects that are meaningful to those communities. And part of that, the excitement about that is that, the folks that are in governing in Republican districts know that these are vital projects that are actually growing hundreds of thousands of new jobs. And it's going to be very difficult to unwind that. And I think all of that is exciting because I think we all know that there are just too many communities that have been left behind for too long. And one of the best things about the Inflation Reduction Act was the commitment to ensure that 40% of those resources actually go to communities most in need. And that's where I believe change happens. I don't think change happens from the federal government making edicts or laws, as much as it's from human beings seeing their lives get better. And when that happens, others actually can turn from being, negative and upset and desperate into that hope and opportunity framing. And I think that's what we all need to keep doing, because that's what's going to change the world.
And Gina, you are the forever optimist, and we all need that as tough information comes. We're not doing this.
Well, it's because everybody's always treated me so well, especially on the Hill. That's where it comes from.
On the Hill. How many hearings have you had over your
9
career?
million. I practice it. This is what I do.
But
you get yelled at.
There's nobody here who wants to yell at her, right? Right. That's why we probably don't have time for questions. No, Gina has represented all of us well. You made the point, though, and I think it's so important. The IRA is about red states and blue states. It's about every part of our political spectrum. It's about our economy, it's about our humanity, and it's about jobs. Is that breaking through? Are you seeing projects, new jobs in all the right places around our country?
Yeah, you are. I mean, the reason why most of the money is going to Republican districts is because if you look at what's happened over the past 40 or 50 years, those are the areas where they lost jobs. We lost our manufacturing sector in the United States in so many ways, and people needed that investment. It was the right place to go. And the exciting thing is that it's kind of showing up in the international arena a lot. Countries all across the world are wondering, how they can do something similar. Because it is really about changing the dynamic from one of negativity to a positive relationship with communities and with corporations and workers. And so that's the exciting part. And I am an optimist. I'm never going to not be, because frankly, I have a family that I love, and I have 5 grandchildren, and I don't intend to sit around moping. I'm going to move. And I think we all have to, because the time is now. We see the dangers, we see the concerns, but the opportunities really abound to turn that into a positive framing.
How do we make sure, and for those in this room, how do they play a role in making sure that every one of those dollars gets out into the community? We're talking about, as Gina said, near $400 billion, 40% of which to communities that have been ignored for decades and decades, if not centuries. If there's anything more you would like to see private sector leaders do to make sure those dollars move, to make sure that we're seeing the kind of innovation, new jobs, new manufacturing, and frankly, in the places where people really need it, what more do you want us all to be doing?
Well, Mindy, a lot of what you've done with the private sector has been really quite remarkable. And I think it's been both making sure that corporations continue to push forward on ESG, even when it's been challenged. It just makes sense that the business community would do this work, and your ability and Ceres' ability to actually keep this momentum going has been a gift to all of us. And honestly, it's really all about recognizing that the solutions to climate change, whether they're at local communities or state level or federal level or beyond, the opportunities are real and they're profitable. The one thing that drives me crazy is when everybody says, you know, we can't risk profits to do climate change investments. That is the most insane sentence I've ever heard in my life. Look, you know as well as I do, corporations need to make profits when they invest. Good. That's called solid economic growth. Everybody wants that. And really, we know that the challenges of climate change, if we don't face them, and if we don't grab new technologies and new solutions, will inundate them with losses, not profits. So let's get real here. Let's get excited. Let's make these things profitable. And let's stop the ridiculousness, a challenge on ESG. Really, it's just, to me, it's insane. And I get a little overly excited about this.
Well, being on the right side of history, being on the right side of facts, being on the right side of economics is worthy of getting excited about. And this movement on woke capitalism, on why we ought not to in the private sector be considering equity and justice and water shortages and nature and climate, is illogical, makes no sense, and will land on the wrong side of history and on deaf ears. Gina, we're coming to an end, but a final request. What do you encourage this audience to do? Are there other policies we ought to be pushing? Should companies be doing more action plans so they really can commit to where they ought to go? Should they be looking globally or locally? How do every one of these wonderful folks walk out and make a difference?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Good,
You just sort of outlined the 3 things. I think the most important thing is I think we need to continue to push the envelope. The IRA was good and the bipartisan, all that was good, but we need a now 2.0. What else are we going to do? I don't think we can stop and call this success and be done. But I also think that corporations really need to work together. I think when one stands up, it may get its tweaked nose for standing up and saying all the right things. But if you work as a coalition, if you work together, I think it provides protection for all, and it also allows you to have the courage to stand up and do what's right, not just for people, not just for our communities, but for the companies themselves. And that's what I look forward to seeing happen.
Great. It all makes sense. To each of you in the room who are pushing forward, you are on the right side of history. You are making a difference. Thank you. And to Gina, your leadership is so wonderful and welcome.
Mindy, you're my hero. Thank you.
Good morning, Climate Week. My name is Andrew Collier, and I am the Director of Freedom to Invest at Ceres. Freedom to Invest is at the forefront, along with our allies and partners, of organizing investors, financial institutions, and companies to push back against restrictive legislative efforts that would ban the consideration of climate risk and other opportunities in decision-making. Climate and related factors are clearly material to protect medium and long-term success of corporate strategy and investment portfolios. One critical piece of the puzzle is the support of state attorneys general, who are pushing for and defending strong disclosure rules and looking out for investors and consumers. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce this rock star panel. Please help me give a warm welcome to Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, California Attorney General Rob Bonta, and New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin. Well, thank you all for being here to discuss this critical issue. But before we get down into it, I do want to ask the audience a couple of questions. Raise your hand if you're familiar with environmental, social, and governance factors. How about climate disclosure? All right, pretty educated crowd. I think we're good to go. So, Attorney General Mays, for the last 2 years, you've worked hard to push companies to operate responsibly. Tell us about some of the work efforts in this space, and why do you think it's important?
Yeah, well, so as some of you may know, because I used to come to these meetings, I'm a former Public Utilities Commissioner. I was a member of the Arizona Corporation Commission, regulated utilities. And you know, I think it's really interesting now as Attorney General to understand how much AGs can do and are doing on environmental issues and on clean energy. And it's just incredibly important to me, given the impacts of climate change in Arizona that are dramatic, whether that's our drought, our extreme heat, and addressing those things, addressing our water supplies. So, you know, from that standpoint, it's critical for people at every level of government, whether it's PUCs or AGs or governors, to be getting involved in this space and doing what we can. And we've done a lot around intervening in front of our Public Utility Commission on energy issues. AGs can do that, or at least in some AG offices, to make sure that our utilities are engaging in clean energy policies, implementing clean energy. And so, you know, it's a priority for our office.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Your work has really been incredible. Attorney General Ellison, Freedom to Invest, along with allies and partners, have been incredibly successful in educating the importance of investors and companies having the freedom to invest and operate responsibly. In your own words, why do you think lawmakers are realizing that fiduciaries have been and should continue to be the professionals that are able to consider ESG factors that are material to investments?
Well, a lot of us as AGs, we might sit on the State Board of Investment, or we clearly, as the chief law officers of our state, want to make sure that people have that freedom. And we're in the midst of a fairly contentious situation where we've seen Republican AGs, quite honestly, sending letters to corporate entities, top 100 companies, sending letters to state boards of investment, and discouraging them and even telling them they might be violating the law they're not, by engaging in environmental sustainability and governance issues, or for that matter, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But you've got to have freedom to make your own calculation about risk, about your own calculations about return, and we don't need a group of ideologically driven AGs or anybody trying to handcuff investors and people who make investment decisions, particularly when all they're doing is looking after the beneficiaries of their pension fund. We live in the reality. What Chris laid out is reality. We have drought, we got flood, we got extreme weather events, we got all this stuff, and to ignore climatic factors is to ignore risk, which is to ignore the best interests of the people who benefit from the pension. So we've got to keep moving on this. I'm looking forward to us being a little bit more protective, a little bit more forward. Right now, it feels like the movement is doing a good job, but we're a little bit defensive. They make a aggressive claim, and we sort of say no. But quite honestly, I think we're getting towards time to really start trying to encourage folks to do what the law allows them to do and what is in the best interest of pension beneficiaries and our state's investment portfolio. So those are a few ideas.
Yeah, I think the audience loves that response. That was great. Attorney General Platkin, great to see you again. What can be done to make sure that investors and financial institutions continue to have the freedom to invest and operate responsibly, and at the same time be accountable to avoid greenwashing? What are the most important things that you're keeping your eye on?
Yeah, and General Ellison just laid it out. I mean, it sort of blows me away that we even have to have this conversation. We hear a lot from the other side about respecting the free market and free enterprise, and yet here we are having groups of Republican AGs weaponizing their office to go after people for making what is so clearly in their long-term business interest. We didn't in the 1990s have like the fax machine lobby come and start suing companies for investing in the internet. It's obvious that any company that is thinking about their long-term interest has to take into account the impact of climate change, and it's their free market right to do so. And that's really what we're standing up here for. That's why it says freedom to invest, so for you to be able to operate and invest in the way that is in the long-term best interest of your investors and the people that you serve. It's in your fiduciary interest. As it relates to greenwashing, yeah, when somebody says something that they're going to do, they have to live by that. That's not new. That's in the basis of our consumer protection laws that we've all enforced for 100 years. It's the laws that several of us used to sue the largest oil and gas companies for lying about the impact of climate change, while, by the way, their own internal research showed them that the impacts were going to be significant. And what did they do? They raised their offshore drilling platforms. They invested in technology to drill in the ice caps because they knew they were going to melt. They took steps not to save the climate, but to maximize their economic benefit, knowing that climate change was coming, and yet at the same time fighting to mislead the public and to prevent us from taking, and you all, frankly, from taking actions that are in your long-term best economic interest. So greenwashing is really important because when somebody says they're going to do something, whether they're lying to you about what is actually happening or they're saying they're doing something good and not, it's deceiving the marketplace. And that's where we step in and have stepped in and will continue to.
That's great. Attorney General Bonta, you've been in the news recently, but this is an audience filled with investors, companies, policymakers, and sustainability advocates. As parting words, what is your message to them on what matters most?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. Good morning, everybody. I do just want to say a few things in that regard. One is consideration of ESG factors is good business. Threats to our planet, our climate, our environment are also threats to our economy, our financial future, our business ecosystems. And just look at some of the data last year, 2023, about 30 major climate, environmental disasters costing over $90 billion. Those are real considerations for our business community. Those are material considerations for fiduciaries. And so this really ought not be political. To me, this is common sense. This is just straight adherence and compliance with the fiduciary duties of business leaders. And if we are to address our shared collective climate challenges, we all have a role to play. As was referenced, a recent role that I took was in the litigation space, suing ExxonMobil for perpetuating the myth of recycling and harming our planet, choking it with plastic waste. And you, our investors, our financial institutions, our businesses have a very critical role to play as well. So I encourage you to lean into it. I do want to say this about California, realizing that I'm not in California. But when I am, and I'll say it today, I often say things like California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We're the largest state in the nation. We are the state that has led to the phrase in politics, as California goes, so goes the nation. And sometimes people will tell you, and they're saying that to you now, that you can't both be good stewards of the environment and address climate threats and risks and do good business. That you can't support your workers and working people and have a thriving economy. And California is here to say, yes, you can. Those are false choices. You should reject that zero-sum fallacy that you can only have one but not the other. We believe, and we have shown, that you can have both. We have grown to be the 5th largest economy in the world, not in spite of our commitment to our environment, to climate action, to our workers, to our consumers, but because of it. We believe you can do many things at once and pursue your values, and that it is good business. It's a smart investment to invest in the future of our natural resources. It's a smart investment to support our environment. It's a smart investment to support and uplift our workers. So California, I believe, with your indulgence, is a model and an example of how we can really embrace ESG factors and thrive economically and financially.
That's great. So we do have a couple more minutes in this session. So in 5 words or less, can you each tell us why this specific topic is important to you? I know it's a tough question.
5 words or less?
5 words or less. You can go over it.
Okay. Well, I'll do 11 words, I think. I used to be a Republican, and I supported ESG then, and I'm a Democrat now, and I still support ESG. And if I could just elaborate on that really quickly, you know, the first thing that I did when I took office in 2022, by the way, I won my race by 280 votes out of a little more than 3 million. They don't call me landslide Mays for nothing. And the first thing I did was I reversed the decision of my Republican predecessor to investigate banks and BlackRock, I believe it was BlackRock, over ESG. I eliminated the investigation and pulled Arizona out of it because it was a ridiculous waste of government resources. And I believe, and it's really remarkable that we have gone from a situation when I used to be a Republican, when Republicans said that they supported the free market, they said that they supported the ability of corporations to make their own decisions about how they accessed capital markets. That's what Republicans in my day, when I was a Republican, used to believe, to the one where today, really, it's Democratic AGs who are standing up for your ability to access capital markets in the way that you see fit. And the last thing I'll say is, remember, you know, you have the right to protect your shareholders. You have the right to make these decisions, and you have a fiduciary obligation to make these decisions. You know, back when I was on the Public Utilities Commission of Arizona, renewable energy was at a premium, right? You guys all remember those days? When renewable energy was not the least cost resource. It is the least cost resource today. And so that's why corporations are making the decision to purchase renewables, to do energy efficiency. And they're doing that because it betters the bottom line and because their customers are demanding that. So keep that in mind. Don't be bullied by people who don't want you to do the right thing.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you all for being here, making the trip here to New York, and thanks to everyone in the audience. If you'd like to learn more about Freedom to Invest, there's a QR code on the screen. You can take a photo of it and head to our website. But thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Good morning. I am Kirsten Spaulding. I'm Vice President of Ceres Investor Network. We work with hundreds of investors in the US and around the world on climate change and other sustainability challenges. This week, we're proud to announce the Global Investor Statement of 2024, signed by 534 investors and financial institutions with more than 29 trillion in assets under management. The statement outlines climate policies governments need to urgently enact to accelerate private sector and large-scale investment, especially in emerging markets. With that, I am pleased to introduce Nigar Arpadarai, our UN climate change high-level champion for COP29, Azerbaijan, for short remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you, Reverend Spaulding, for this kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here in the financial capital of the world with Ceres. And thank you, Ceres CEO Mindy Lober, for your decades of climate leadership. It's a great honor to be here, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful to Ceres and all the Investors Agenda partners for your work with investors aimed at achieving the Paris Agreement's goals. It's an honor to address you today as the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP29, a role focused on bridging the work of governments with the dynamic frontline work of non-state actors community, from CEOs to NGOs, from city mayors to youth leaders, from indigenous peoples to university academics. Together as high-level champions, Razan Al-Mubarak and myself are committed to working with leading non-state actors to accelerate a just transition, protecting and restoring nature, and increasing the flow of finance to developing countries. Make no mistake, climate risk will affect all of us. My own country, Azerbaijan, faces a massive challenge of depleting water resources, including the declining level of the Caspian Sea, the largest inland sea in the world. Today, Azerbaijan is diversifying and looking to scale up renewable energy and opportunities in the transition. Companies, banks, insurers, and investors around the world cannot run or hide from material climate risk. And the opportunities are immense, from clean energy to transportation and nature. Climate risk must therefore be at the boardroom and investment committee decision-making. Your conference here today is not just a conference, but a critical moment to exchange with each other and to help set the direction and pace for climate action over the next decade. And I can't think of a better organization than Ceres to support business and investors in rising to the challenges of climate risk. Ceres members have over $44 trillion in assets under management. 73% of Ceres company and policy networks members have already set greenhouse gas reduction goals. With this foundation, you are well placed to go further and faster. Your existing work in the following areas is already making a difference: climate risk reporting, investor engagement with companies, climate action transition plans, and your advocacy through the investor agenda. Your work cannot stand still and it must accelerate with a laser-like focus on implementation and delivery. There is no time to slow down what you have underway or to wait for others to improve first. So where to focus? And when there are so many competing priorities and time is so short, as leaders in climate change from the businesses and finance communities, there are 3 areas I urge you to focus on in 2024 and 2025. First, make clear to the parties to the Paris Agreement what you need so that country climate plans or NDCs are investable. Finance and business are enablers of the transition. You know the drivers of transition and the hurdles. Your expertise is invaluable to implementing the Paris Agreement. High-level champions published a report earlier this week to highlight the insights, priorities, and offers of support from businesses, investors, subnationals, for national governments to leverage in the design and implementation of their NDCs. Their message is clear. High ambition NDCs with sectoral pathways complemented by clear financing strategies can send a strong market signal to catalyze investment. Second, collaborate closely with national level policymakers on implementation of real economy policy and regulatory frameworks that will help the finance flow. While doing so, support reforms to the international financial architecture and MDBs so finance flows to developing countries. Third, continue to take near-term action to advance net zero and transition finance, including to overlooked small and medium-sized enterprises. We also need innovation in the harder areas such as adaptation and nature finance, with more attention to de-risking solutions to support mainstream financiers. COP29's vision is enhance ambition and enable action. When we speak about enhancing ambition, we speak about keeping 1.5 degrees, so sending signals to government, to the parties, to come up with ambitious plans. When we speak about enabling action, we speak about finance, we speak about capacity building, we speak about technologies. COP29 team presidency has launched 14 initiatives, which are having a focus on different sectors: energy, agriculture, SMEs, green skills, urban development, water. So all of these initiatives will be in a focus for us. But one of them is specifically the one that I want to focus is called Big Fit. So Baku Initiative for Climate Finance, Investment and Trade Dialogue aims to support investable and implementable NDCs, which deliver on sustainable development goals, because the link between NDCs and SDGs is extremely important. This week, I'm also excited to launching my 2 key campaigns towards COP29, which aim to raise the profile of overlooked topics: climate-proofing SMEs, supporting small and medium enterprises access tailored resources and capacity building, showcasing their leadership and demonstrating how corporations can support SMEs in their supply chains. SMEs are key to delivery of transition, and this campaign will put a spotlight on them. Impact Makers, the second campaign, bringing global attention to the often untold stories of those change makers using skills, ingenuity, and solutions to address the climate crisis across regions, sectors, and communities. Their stories will help to inspire positive change. I am also supporting COP29's presidency's initiatives for climate finance, investment, and trade. At COP29, we will be convening the Business Investment and Philanthropy Climate Platform and dedicated event for CEOs. This will focus on finance. I warmly welcome Ceres CEO Mindy Luber and Ceres members to this event to help advance finance. As companies and investors, you can move with greater speed and innovation than some national governments. You know, there is no turning back from this, the driver to the transition. It's ambitious, it's hard, it's achievable. And I stand ready to help you accelerate and amplify the impact of your leadership. Investors are clearly paying attention to governments' national climate plans, which are due early next year. And it's great to see, it will be great to see the leaders, many of whom are in the race to zero and taking voluntary action, also offer specific insights on what will be the most important and effective in increasing capital flows to climate solutions, including high ambition, sectoral specifics, and focusing on emerging and developing countries. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we want to invite you all to Baku in November because COP29 is a momentum. This is exactly the time when we all need to unite, and it's a litmus test for Paris Agreement. That's why see you all in Baku, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, climate champion Nigar Arpadarai, for your leadership and for those remarks. I'm now joined today by New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, the sole fiduciary of New York State Common Retirement Fund. The subject that we're going to discuss in a short chat here is the investor leadership that's necessary to support policy advocacy, the kinds of policies that we need coming out of COP, going through COP, to incentivize private investment and leadership across our economic sectors to decarbonize and invest in the climate solutions of the future. So I'll begin, Tom, with a question. You've been one of the early supporters of this call on governments on climate change. With more than 500 other signatories, you signed the Global Investor Statement. Why did you sign? Why does it matter?
We're trying to do our part, and we have been for many years now, as you know. And New York very much appreciates the collaboration with Ceres. It's really helped to inform our work, made a difference in our strategy. And we always keep in mind the fiduciary role. We have 1.2 million New Yorkers who depend on our decisions to keep their pensions and their retirement secure. But we view climate as such an existential threat to all of us, but certainly to our investments as well. And I wish I could say just investors or just pension funds could change the equation completely on our own, but we can't. And we need government very much to be proactive in supporting our efforts in so many ways. Certainly in terms of providing incentives to help with the transition, to aid us as far as certainly encouraging emissions reduction targets, disclosure of information. One of our big challenges as investors is having appropriate information. So requiring financial disclosure of climate-related issues, certainly what the SEC has been moving to do, has been very important to us as we evaluate our various investment strategies. And obviously financial incentives will make a big difference as we seek out new investment opportunities. If more can be done to provide incentives for the kind of investments on renewable and clean energy that will be key to our transition to that low carbon economy that we all want to see. All of this will help us do our work and also be part of that holistic approach to meeting the goals, certainly net zero by 2050, hopefully sooner. There's a lot of work to do, but the investor world can't do it in a vacuum. We do need the government support.
Yeah. Thank you for your leadership in that statement and the recognition that it's a partnership, really, between the private investment community, the industries that have to be transformed, and our governments around the world working together. I want to just ask you now a question about New York Commons' particular strategies, the ways that you're addressing climate risk. You were one of the first funds to issue a climate action plan, really laying out your comprehensive forward-looking strategy for addressing climate risks and seizing climate opportunities. And I'd note that following you, my team has recently done research on the largest investors in the United States, and we now find that of those top 50 investors, 77% have made net zero commitments, and the majority of those have done climate action plans, really using the same kind of a structure that you laid out when you first did this. Can you tell us a little bit about your plan and where you see it going in the future?
Well, as you know, it's been a journey, and you and Ceres have been part of that journey. It really came up with a jumping off point in 2019 of frankly, some of this discussion about divestment. And we convened a panel of experts on climate and on finance to really look at the overall question. And the panel made several recommendations, which then evolved into our climate action plan. But it really took the perspective that it just wasn't a question of investment divestment. It really was a question of evaluating our investment portfolio from the perspective of transition readiness. Recognizing that all of this has to happen, but again, just selling stock is not going to create the transition, right? Someone else is going to buy the stock, probably being a less responsible investor than we are. So following up on the various recommendations we developed in 2019, I think it was one of the first in the country for public pension plans, an investor climate action plan. And we've been following that plan pretty rigorously. And it really is a combination of strategies, and so much of it really relates to the assessment of our portfolio, where we are today and where we want to go. You know, certainly apropos of your first question, public policy advocacy is very important. State level, federal level, regulatory level as well, because there has to be an overall context that supports the transition. Certainly, assessing our portfolio, seeing where we're at, setting what we call minimum standards for the companies we invest in, and I underline the word minimum. Not necessarily saying that they're perfect, but looking at goals related to climate, and as you know, we set a net zero goal for the year 2040, little ahead of some of the others. And what we've been doing is looking at various sectors, and we started with the energy sector for obvious reasons. And we've done assessments of our thermal coal holdings, our shale oil and gas, oil sands, and more recently, integrated oil and gas. Companies that fail to meet the minimum standards then gets to a higher level of evaluation. And some of that consideration is reducing or totally divesting our holdings. And we've done that in a number of cases with a number of companies. Where it still meets our fiduciary obligation. But I think from our perspective, those strategies are really targeted at assessing risk and minimizing risk, again, tying back what we're doing to fiduciary responsibility. But the other part of it, which I think is so important and frankly doesn't get as much attention as I think it should, is seizing on the opportunities that are presented by the emerging low-carbon economy, seizing on the opportunities to be part of the transition, and providing the capital to support the transition. So we have a sustainable and climate solutions allocation of our pension fund. We set a goal of $20 billion. We've met that goal. So we've added another $20 billion. So now our goal is $40 billion across all parts of the portfolio, public equity, private equity, real estate. Obviously, as a pension fund, we do a lot in index funds, so looking at climate-friendly indexes has been a priority. But this is a way for us to get a return, be at the ground level of some of these wonderful opportunities. So I always try to say to folks, when we look at where we don't want to put our money, where we do want to put our money, we start with a risk profile, a risk assessment. But just as important of the risk piece of it is looking for the opportunities. And to the extent that a public pension fund can be part of seeding and supporting those companies that are doing renewable energy, doing clean energy, are taking aggressive steps on the transition, looking at all of the issues related to biodiversity and nature and water and all the other related issues. This is a very important way for us to continue to meet our bottom line in terms of meeting our goals as far as investment strategy, but being part of the solution. So we're gonna keep doing more of that. As we get the $40 billion out the door, we'll do even more.
It's wonderful. Thank you for that leadership. I would say to the other, really good. To the other investors in the room, you just heard Tom kind of go through an outline of what really belongs in every investor's climate action plan. There needs to be an investment strategy, and those minimum standards part of yours, but also the climate solutions allocation, really, really critical. The engagement part of the plan, working with those companies.
I did mention the engagement part, thank you, because that's very much a part of what we do. So particularly with our public equity, as a shareholder, we've been very active, both in terms of pressing resolutions on emission reduction, disclosure of emission information. We've been very proactive as far as board of director votes and voting against boards of directors at places like Exxon. We still have a voice there and try to press even some of the less than desirable players to move in the right direction. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I did leave that out, that engagement strategy, still having a seat at the table in corporate discussions. You know, I think too many folks minimize the importance of engagement. I'm not saying it's a substitute for everything else we're doing, but engagement is a very key part of what we do.
And setting the priorities for these heaviest emitting companies. You've really been a leader in Climate Action 100+ with other investors and managers really saying it's these sectors, the heavy emitting sectors, that we have to address first. We've seen your leadership, as we noted, in the policy arena. You've done a great job of disclosing through using a TCFD report, disclosing your progress on your own plan, and of course, at the top level, sending that signal to all of your staff and really making sure that this plan is governed well. So thank you. I want to turn just as a last question to the IRA. This is the policy we have here in the United States that is really jump-starting the investment with public dollars aligned with private dollars. I know there's a focus on underserved communities. Maybe you can speak for just a minute about what you've seen in New York in terms of IRA investments.
Well, it's really beginning. So we've seen a couple of situations where there have been loans to two companies in upstate New York, one dealing with a clean hydrogen project, another dealing with a battery-supported resource recovery project. I'd say it's just beginning. I'm hopeful that from our perspective as an investor, we'll see more activity that will then create an opportunity for us to co-invest with these opportunities. So I think it's really in its infancy in terms of a direct impact in New York. But it is exactly the kind of strategy from government, incentivizing from government, that we think in the long run for us as an investor will be very helpful to the goals that we have. Because meeting that 2040 goal is not going to be easy. Right. And we're still trying to work our way through how we do the proper assessment and evaluation of our own progress. It's not simple, it's new territory for us, as I think it is for all investors. But we're committed to the goal, and we're trying to be as aggressive and as ambitious as we can be.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'd like to thank all of our global partners who've been with us in developing the Global Investor Statement, and invite all the investors in the audience to join Tom and the other 500+ investors. Special thanks to AIGCC, CDP, IGCC, IIGCC, PRI, and UNEP-FI, who've joined Ceres in gathering signatures for this Global Investor Statement. Thank you again for being part of the MainStage program, and thanks to all of you for all the work you're doing addressing climate change in your portfolios and working with us to advocate for the whole system approach that will be necessary to solve the climate crisis and invest in the zero emissions economy that is coming. Thank you.
Thank you.